Hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most, JJ. Listen, I know I'm supposed to be meeting every person in the world, but Tucker and I have some very serious stuff we need to take care of in this, namely where VHSs are going to be in the organization, a little bit about depression, talking about ruts, and then bringing it all home when I recommend to Tucker a great company to trim his hair. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode, JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
Okay, so JJ, I have a question for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
I have an issue at home,
Okay.
and I'm struggling with it.
Is it home maintenance? Is it a relationship?
It's not a relationship. I'm
okay.
still single. Thank you for bringing that up again.
Even a relationship between like you and yourself.
On my way over here from the movie I just saw, I got a text from Sarah Sean saying, "Who is that?" And I had shared a photo of some lady wearing a VHS dad t-shirt, and she thought I was sharing a photo of a new girlfriend. And I was like, oh, no, I don't know this person. This is just a funny shirt. Sarah.
Yeah, we're just cutting you deep today, huh?
Yeah, you guys are really digging in. Anyways, okay, so as I've been organizing my VHS tapes and finding like the different groupings I want to put them in, I'm still on the fence about this, but I've been working on a section of animation. Okay, so like all the animated stuff I have. And I decided last night that in the animation, on the animation shelf of my VHS tapes, I'm going to put Who Framed Roger Rabbit in there, even though it's a live action film that also has animation in it, but I think it's kind of cross genre.
Sure.
So I think it fits up there. Well, now that it's up there, I really want to put my VHS copy of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids right next to it because it has
a Roger Rabbit short
at the very beginning.
I believe it's Tummy Trouble.
Exactly. And Roger Rabbit's even on the sleeve of the tape itself. It looks so good sitting on the shelf right next to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is not an animated film, right? Yeah. So now I'm kind of torn because I like it being up there, but I also want Honey, I Shrunk the Kids to be with like my family films that I grew up with a kid like Hook and Casper and other stuff like that, right?
Okay, well, I think that the answer is pretty easy here, which is Who Framed Roger Rabbit can fit in both the animated and live action genre. Little Mermaid cannot.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So you take Who Framed Roger Rabbit out of animation and you put it into like your family films or whatever you've chosen to do for that. And that way you can put Honey, I Shrunk the Kids next to it. Now, that being said, if you're talking about like, The Page Master.
Right.
Right. Which is a movie with Macaulay Culkin where he gets sucked into an animated world and he fights. I believe Whoopi Goldberg is the voice of a book and some other people are voices of books. The majority of that movie is animated. Same with Rock-a-Doodle, a movie where a young boy's farm is flooding and it's live action. And
I forgot that it was live action.
It's live action in the very beginning.
Really?
The farm is flooding, and then he gets turned into a kitten, an animated kitten. That's a Don Bluth movie. And at the very, very end, he turns back into a real boy, like after his death. Like he dies, and then he turns into a boy. And I've always felt at the very end of that movie is very jarring because now he's with all of his animated friends who are anthropomorphic, meaning that it's like chickens wearing bikini tops. But I've always felt off-putting because now he's in this animated world and I'm like, I'm going to assume that he's in some kind of like afterlife.
Right. But a couple issues with what I have with what you're saying.
Okay.
One, now Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is being placed. I guess I would have to place it before because is Tummy Trouble a prequel to Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
I don't believe so.
It's a sequel to Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yeah. I mean, Roger was developed for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then they
Right.
made a series of shorts after
Got it.
that were included. In fact, there's like a really great one on a roller coaster that's really funny.
Okay. Well, because in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, though, the conceit of the animation being there is that, no, there's an animated world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these are cartoon people. And because of that acknowledgement, I think it deserves a special place in the animation section. And that if I'm placing it in the live action section and then placing Honey, I Shrunk the Kids after it, I'm also then violating like a alphabetical order thing because I'm saying W and then H right after it.
Are you familiar with the movie Cool World?
Yeah.
I think it was like Ralph Bakshi.
Yeah,
like
it was
maybe
Brad Pitt's in that.
Yeah.
Young Brad Pitt.
I mean, by your rules that you're establishing here, Cool World would fit in the animated section.
If I
But
had that on
it has-
VHS, I'd put it there.
It has no place amongst those movies because I'm going to say half of that movie is not animated, and they leave the animated world, and that's when it becomes, I can't remember her name, but like the real version of the girl that she's voicing
Mhm.
becomes like real.
I would still place it there. Like if I'm curating animated films as a special genre of VHS tape,
Mhm.
I think I'd want to add to it in any way that I could that
Let
I
me put
think
it this
would
way.
work.
These belong on one end or the other of the shelf, right? So they're outlying of the genre. And I'm not disagreeing that Who Frames Roger Rabbit. I think that like when I just watched the making of that not too long ago, and they talk extensively about how many animated shots are in this, and it's just sort of mind-boggling how many there are.
Maybe I need to differentiate it as a genre in unto itself,
A subgenre, correct?
like
Yeah, I
a
think
like a
that'd be good.
crossing of live action and
Even Disney Studios did that because they had the Alice Adventures way back in the day in black and white, where they took a real little girl actress and put her in animated environments. And so they didn't necessarily fall into animation, but they also didn't, we didn't really have like a hybrid. And so it was kind of creating its own genre.
a couple other things that go in here now, right? Mary Poppins,
Yes,
Bed Knobs and Broomsticks.
100%.
What else we got?
I mean,
I
really,
would totally put. I need to make this shelf now. This is the answer. You've helped me answer now.
Okay.
It needs its own genre. It can't belong in one or the other.
I have a request for you.
Okay.
So before Disney movies for a long time, they showed this like sizzle reel of other Disney movies. And it had a clip of Herbie and when he bounces across the water.
Yep. And you see them putting the globe on the bed knob and broomstick.
and it starts to glow.
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking
And
about.
I've been trying to find that sizzle reel for years because there's like a fun song that plays behind
Is it not on YouTube?
So here's the thing. Trying to find it on YouTube by going like Disney VHS sizzle reel, Disney VHS, Disney promotional video. There's a lot of things that you can ask it for, but it's hard to like come up with something that like someone has put it on there. And so in all honesty, I want Tucker Tube.
Well, I guarantee you it's on one of these tapes.
Yeah. So when
Yeah.
you're watching them,
You
like,
got it, man.
please look for
No,
it.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's an interesting thing that you brought that up today because lately I've been watching a lot of content and a lot of stuff that I haven't seen in a while. And I had an experience at the movie theater the other day that was less than stellar. My wife does not like animated movies. And it's not that she doesn't appreciate them, but it's just not her cup of tea. She's like, there's so much great stuff to watch right now. Why would I watch something that's not aimed towards me? And I was like, that's the thing is animated movies are aimed towards everybody
Can
nowadays.
I say something right now?
Yeah.
I've never respected your wife less than
Less
I do
than right now?
I deeply disrespect her.
I know,
opinion on this.
right?
I'm so sorry. Continue.
And you know what's funny is like she's somebody who has like a VHS and a DVD copy of Heavy Metal.
Okay, there you go. Right?
Yeah.
I have
So-
DVD and Blu-ray. I don't have VHS of Heavy Metal. I'm kind of jealous.
I
of it.
mean, the VHS art on Heavy Metal is top
It's awesome.
notch.
Yeah.
So I knew she wasn't going to want to go to this movie, even though we've been on a Sam Rockwell kick lately.
Okay.
Have you seen the movie Moon?
Yes.
So good, right?
Very good.
Like so good.
Have you seen Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Yeah, like let's hear him out.
Regular or menthol?
Yeah. So Sam Rockwell has a really great career because he pops up in movies where he does a little bit of everything, right? Galaxy Quest as Guy.
Yep.
Literally, his character's name is Guy.
Probably the breakout character from that movie.
Easily, yeah.
Right.
And so the whole time, I'm the guy who dies. I don't even have a credit. They're like, maybe you're the plucky comic relief. So being on the Sam Rockwell kick, there's a movie in theaters right now called The Bad Guys. And it's an animated film with a wolf, a snake, a shark, a piranha, and a tarantula. And they are like a team of criminals because everyone looks at them and they're like, oh, these are the mean animals, right? So they live in a world where animals walk and talk and drive cars and wear clothing, but there's also human beings too. So Sam Rockwell is the voice of the wolf. So I'm like, I'm going to go see this movie, right? So I go see this movie on a Friday afternoon, and the place is packed with kids because that's who the intended audience is going to be. Not going to lie, the movie in general, not stellar. They make some choices in there that I'm like, I get what you're going for, but it's not great. It's not that good. But modern projection systems use a bulb to throw light, and there must have been something wrong with this bulb that was causing it to be regular for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it would go like 2 shades darker.
Oh, okay.
And then it would come back to bright and then go 2 shades darker.
Weird.
And so after about 5 minutes of this, and I noticed it during the credits, and I thought, well, maybe there's something wrong with just the beginning of this or something.
Right.
I went and I complained. And one of the managers came, and I could see that they were watching what was going on, and then they left. And then it never got better. In fact, it got worse. It started flickering at one point. And I'm sitting here being like, and these kids are loving it. These kids are laughing their butts off. And I'm like, do you not see the issue with the lighting? And it's at this point, I'm thinking, they probably have made an active choice here to not stop the movie and reset the bulb or whatever. Even though nowadays, I'm sure you just hit pause and then you can do whatever you need to. Because in my mind, I'm playing out the scenario of like, they don't want to take people out of this movie, but what they don't understand is I'm not even being allowed to get into this movie because of this.
It'd be nice if the thing could pause and if somebody could go up on screen that says technical difficulties, 1 moment, please.
Right.
And then correct it or something.
Which,
like
by the way, some of the, you've been watching a lot of Simpsons lately. Have you watched any of the episodes of The Simpsons where they've got to stop like a television show like Krusty or something, and it's like technical difficulties?
Oh, yeah. And
it shows like a drunk guy at the control board or something like that. That's a great gag in any movie where they decide to use the we've got technical issues. Gremlins 2 does a great job with that because it shows a gremlin over the please stand by screen. So I'm leaving, and they're handing out these, we're sorry, here's a free movie. And so the people who are there are apologizing, the clerks are apologizing, sorry for the technical issues, please, come back and see us another time. And this is what I hear over and over and over again. Well, I didn't even notice. There was something wrong. Oh, sure. And so they're taking these passes, and I'm sitting there being like, you fools, you simple fools. How can you not see that there was a major issue with this thing? I also came to the point of where lately I've noticed I've started stress eating a lot. So that's become my go-to if I'm super stressed as I eat something. I was done with my popcorn 10 minutes into the movie, a large popcorn. I mean, I wolfed that thing down because I'm sitting there being like, God, I got to go now. I got to complain about something, and I don't want to be the guy who complains. And
was you were alone in the theater?
No.
Bill wasn't with you?
Oh yeah, I was seeing it by myself.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
So not like an empty theater, but no one was with you in your party.
It was
just like me and watching Doctor Strange.
Right. It's better than the last time I went to a kids movie all by myself, and I had that really rude kid who kept crying and pooped his pants. And I'm like, where are your parents? What's going on here? This last week, I had a very, very stressful week at work because we've had a ton of big projects coming up. And I have really valued the time I've been at home, but I realized I maybe got a little bit of light depression going on because I found myself going to bed a little earlier, and it was a little harder to get out of bed than every day. So I'm trying to find ways to say, listen, you need to embrace the fact that you're here today. Oh, Actually, by the way, so I had a real kick. I wanted to listen to some Norm Mcdonald stuff recently because there's news right now that Norm Mcdonald recorded a secret stand-up special to be played after his death.
Yep. Pretty incredible.
I'm listening to a special he did in 2011, and the whole beginning, like 10 minutes, is like, isn't it good to be alive? I'm terrified of death. It's great to be alive. And it's all these things like, everyone's like, oh, isn't this soup great? And he goes, the soup's all right, but being alive, that's where it's at. And it just has made me feel horrible, made me feel really bummed out about the fact that Norm Macdonald's gone. And there's so many people that we don't appreciate until they're gone. I feel like John Lovitz is going to be like that, where after John Lovitz passes, everyone's going to be like, oh, he was so great. And be like, you liars. You never even watched the revamp of The Critic on yahoo.com.
Right. I mean, within the past year, there was a photograph of that they took of Norm Macdonald, Bob Saget, and Gilbert Gottfried all hanging out at like a bar somewhere. And just last year, it's a photo of the three of them together. And now all three are just wiped off the earth, Crazy. Think about, I've got Marvel on the mind right now because I just came in from seeing Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. And think about Black Panther, losing Chadwick Boseman in the way that we all did, where no one knew he was sick and suddenly he was gone, just like Norm Macdonald. No one really knew he was sick and then they're gone. It's nuts. If I were diagnosed with a terminal illness, I don't know if I'd be able to keep it secret. I think I'd be shouting it to the rooftops. I think that's me, though. That would be my reaction to it.
When my dad was diagnosed, of course, they're like, well, it's not, nothing's terminal right away, right? Because you want to try everything that you can do. And so my dad went to the Roger Maris Cancer Institute, and then they're like, we're going to cut your tongue out. And he's like, this doesn't sound great. And then you got a second opinion. They're like, there'd be no point in cutting your tongue out. We need to put you through this chemo and radiation. And then when they couldn't do anything, he went to Bethesda, Maryland and did this trial drug and everything like that. And he went to the Mayo, and it was in Bethesda where his tumor has started shrinking, and then the drug just stopped having its potency, which is why you have drug trials like that. And then they're like, oh, unfortunately. And I remember my mom telling me, she's like, when we got the news that they said there's nothing else we can do, but we'd like to make you comfortable. My dad hadn't had a beer in 3 months, and he went out and bought a 6-pack, and apparently he took 3 sips of a beer, and it didn't do the same thing I think that it used to do for him. Right. And at this point, all of these things that he had gone through had left him so weak that he wasn't able to go out and have a round of golf. At this point, he's got a feeding tube in his stomach. And that's one thing that I think would be really difficult with a terminal illness, is deciding okay, am I going to lead my life in a way that I want to right now? But have you already become a husk because you tried to keep life for a little while longer? I don't think my dad regrets trying those things, but I think at some point too, wouldn't it have been nice to just not know and golf and go to the lake and see friends and eat steak and then find out you've got 3 weeks? Yeah, if you were terminal, what's the longest amount of time that you think you could stand?
Oh, I could stand forever. As far as not dying?
No, I'm saying if they told you, would you rather be told that you have 2 weeks to live, or would you rather be told you've got a year to live?
A year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd want a year for sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's part of it depends on where let's say I get that news tomorrow. I think the very next thing I assess is my belief on the afterlife or not, right? Is to sit back down with that. I know where I'm at with it right now, but I probably reassess at that moment as well, right? If there's some sort of hope to cling to. But I would still rather have more time than less, even though that more time would probably be really painful in a lot of ways, but also would be, enough time to just let everyone knew how I felt, good or for bad, that kind of a thing.
I'd like to think that, do you remember when those divers got trapped? Because the tide had come up, and they're any person who goes in could only bring enough oxygen to get them out.
Right.
I'd like to be like, I'm the guy who's going to volunteer for that, right? Like, I'm on the way out. Let me save some lives while I can do this. Let me do something heroic. But maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe it's just sort of like, I'm going to plant these tomatoes. Why? You're never going to see them grow. Be like, well, so there's something after I'm gone.
Right. I think that's incredibly important. Planting trees under the shade of which you'll never rest. Like that's a really beautiful, beautiful concept. And when I'm feeling depressed, that's a thought I try to conjure as well of what shade am I under the rest of right now? Or am I resting under right now? Right. The privileges I have in my life, a lot of that was all created by people who did things before I even existed. Right. So what am I doing right now, if anything, to do that for someone else?
Right. I gave a sermon this morning about the adage of like, you reap what you sow. But to me, like that idiom means more than just like, well, what you do, you get back. Right.
Right.
So to me, I use it in improv, for example. If you sow sparingly, you reap sparingly. If you sow generously, you reap generously. So in the context of an improv scene, think of like this. If I walk out and I'm like, my name is Todd, and that's all that I put into the scene, there's really not much that I'm allowed to, to fulfill for that character. So it's all exploration from that point out, which is not a horrible thing. But if you front load a scene with a bunch of detail, finding your way to like get that through or to have those gifts available is better. So it's like, I'm Todd. I like to skateboard, and my grandfather invented salsa. Now, all of a sudden, I might never bring up the fact that I skateboard again, but at the very end, who's to say, like at the very end of the scene where Todd is with his teacher, like all of a sudden it's like, listen, the place is burning down, and the only way to get out of here is a sweet half pipe. Todd can come to the rescue, right?
Right.
So if you sow generously, you reap generously. Right. And so in part of my sermon, I said, listen, think about it like this. Think of the things that you sow in your life. What are the things that you plant? If you plant honesty, you reap trust. If you sow generosity, you reap the feeling of doing good for others. And so why not think about those things that you do in your life, and not for what the consequence is going to be, but for what is this ultimately going to do? And if you can be happy in doing something that's actually going to reap benefits for others, it feels good, right? So you're in the midst, I guess, of directing a play, which has been kind of this real wonky situation. But you sow creative endeavors into this play.
Right.
And no one's going to give you a standing ovation for it.
Right.
They're going to give your cast a standing ovation.
Deservedly so.
But the cast can't get there without you.
Sure.
So that's a situation where you're doing something that fuels you creatively, surely, but really you're giving other people an opportunity to do this by saying, like, I'm willing to take this role. The same way that the cast is saying, I'm willing to do this so that you can feel the creative juices flow on it, type of thing.
Right.
And I try and approach more and more stuff in my life with that idea of like, okay, will this make me feel good in some way, shape, or form? So I built this thing last year that looks like a hangman's gallows if you look at it. So think about like, any movie from medieval times and like what that kind of looks like. But what I have on it are these hammock chairs, and they're friggin' awesome. And I've wanted them since we had them at the lake when I was a kid, and it's a personal little hammock, and it's a little swing. It's great. So when the swings are on it, you totally understand what it is. When the swings are not on it, like during the late fall, winter, spring, it looks like I'm getting ready to like hang someone in my backyard. But I built that, and now I love like being out there, and it scratches the itch of I need to spend more time outside. So I put in hard work and a little creative thought so that I could appreciate being outside more.
Right. You gave future you a gift, right? Like this concept of sowing and reaping and doing good for others is great. It also applies to you yourself in that it can be as little as, I did laundry yesterday. And so today I get to have clean laundry to wear, right? I didn't want to do laundry yesterday. I was feeling pretty depressed, but I was also super tired. I just got through my 5 days of COVID quarantine because it's ripped through the Mr. Burns cast and crew and decimated our performance schedule. And so I've been at home thinking about how, at least half of our performances are gone and they'll never come back and we'll never have them. And who knows what we get to keep of our last 8 performances. And so, yeah, it can be really, really tough to motivate yourself to do the things that we should do every single day on some level, which is some form of an investment in the next day. And so sometimes that is, just like it sounds, you invest in something, let's say with money, and then it grows into something later, or let's say you invest money in a trust fund for a child that when they turn 18, they can take that. But it can also be as simple as doing some laundry today so that tomorrow you have clean laundry, right? And that next day when you have clean laundry, you can thank previous you, because you waking up, it's almost like, oh, I didn't do this. The me yesterday did it, and they did it for me today, and I'm really happy that they did that. And that is super important. You mentioned Theater B. My life at Theater B has been one where I've, through the structure and resources that Theater B provides, I've grown as a professional artist who is ready to start doing more things outside of that thing, right? And so I've been thinking a lot about what should an ensemble member at Theater B do, especially if they've been in it since I have been, since 2007, and getting opportunities to direct shows like Mr. Burns, whether or not anyone sees them. And that at some point, it's also my job to get out of the way. And, we only do 4 shows a season at Theater B. So I'm just thinking a lot about, too, like, what do I do at Theater B going forward? I'll still be a part of the organization, no question. I'm not going to leave, but I think it might be something where I start stepping back from taking artistic opportunities there, because the same way that I grew in it and got to the point where I'm at now, where I think I'm ready to do bigger stuff, other artists who are going through it now or who will go through it at some point should have that same opportunity. And so it's I don't mean to mix metaphors here, I guess, because you want to plant trees under the shade of which others will rest, but you also don't want to block out the sun from their growth, right? And so that's a big part of it too. So yeah, like I think people who started Theater B, then they put work into it, and then I benefited from that. And now ensemble members like me and other people should be putting work into it so that other artists can do the same thing and grow from it. One thing I found out about myself doing Mr. Burns is that I'd like to think of myself as a professional producer, but compared to other professionals, I'm like an advanced hobbyist at this point, because I just kind of do it in whatever way I can figure it out, right? Versus like really diving into things like industry standards. How do these things get done in the real world all the time? What should be expected of someone? How do you communicate that expectation to other people? And it really showed me that I've come a long way, but there's so much farther for me to go as well. So to do that, I have to step out of Theater B at some point, as far as an active ensemble member taking artistic roles, right? So it's a weird thing. It's a weird place to be in, but I find myself there.
I get a lot of like kids, like high school age kids, who ask me like, "Hey, I want to be on Saturday Night Live. How do I do it?" And I'm like, if I knew that, I'd be on Saturday Night Live right now.
Right.
And I said, but this is what I do know from listening to podcasts and reading books and articles, is that you need to live in a world where you're not going to be on Saturday Night Live, and you're just doing something that you think is fun and creative and great, and it fills your cup. And if Saturday Night Live comes knocking, it's because they saw someone who was doing something so wonderful and unique. I'm listening to a book right now, comedy drama, which is Bob Odenkirk's memoir. And, famous sketch comedian. He rails pretty hard on Saturday Night Live, and he talks about like when he and David Cross create Mr. Show, and they said, we want something that is different from what everyone else is doing. It's not pandering. It's not like this. but he has an amazing story that I think you're going to appreciate with Tim Heidecker and Eric Wareheim. And so he is he's done Mr. Show, and he's been in a couple other things, and he's made forgettable movies that nobody wanted to watch. And one day he gets a manila envelope at his office, Bob Odenkirk. And he goes, normally I just throw it away, but I had to kill 2 hours before I went to lunch. So I opened it. And inside was a DVD, a letter, a t-shirt, and an itemized bill for the t-shirt and the DVD. And it was from Tim and Eric, who were two guys who were just, neither of them had any background in comedy. They just wanted to make, but they just made these like silly kind of funny movies. And they thought this would be fun to do on a bigger scale. How do we get to Hollywood? And like Eric or Tim Heidecker says, like, we're just two schmoes. Like knew nothing. We lived in New York, but we weren't working the comedy club scene. We weren't doing anything. So he goes, I really liked Mr. Show. So I waited until the end of the credits and I saw the name of a production company. So I looked them up in the yellow pages and I called them and they said, fuck you. Bob Odenkirk doesn't work. Like, we're the company that gave them the money for this. This is Bob Odenkirk's office. And so, or his agent. So he called his agent. And his agent goes, I don't keep track of Bob Odenkirk. You got to call his assistant. So he got his assistant's number. And the assistant's like, I can't let you talk to Bob Odenkirk. Here's the mailing address. And so he talks about like seeing that itemized like bill really threw him. He goes, this is attention grabbing, right?
Right.
And so he calls him while this is playing in the background. He goes, I didn't even watch all the stuff that they had. And his favorite part was this guy who was going to the mayor of a town to pitch a restaurant idea, which eventually becomes Tom Goes to the Mayor, which, by the way, I was obsessed with that show. I have not watched that in, I'm going to say 10, maybe 15 years. If you get a chance, go to YouTube. Tom Goes to the Mayor. It's this really low rent animation style where they take a photo and then
it's hard to even call it animation.
Right,
it
yeah.
is, but it's hard to even call it that.
It's like they take a photo of somebody and then they put it through like a filter that makes it look like a sketch outline. And so someone's like, hey, hello, welcome. But it's the same image for hey, hello, welcome. It's static. And then the next time it cuts to them, they maybe have their finger on their chin because they're thinking. And it is just stellar. I'm going to tell you 2 episodes right off the top. One is the holiday episode, Rats Off to You, where Tim Heidecker's character is trying to sell T-shirts that have a little rat with a top hat called Rats Off to You. And another one is the one where the mayor's nephew helps them open a World War II themed pizza restaurant that is out of this world. Also, I should say pipe camp. Pipe camp is another one too, where you go to a camp to learn how to smoke a pipe. Those episodes they're absurd and wonderful. And like, it's no wonder that, and so halfway through season 2 of Tom Goes to the Mayor, they get a call from Adult Swim and they're like, guys, I got bad news. This isn't connecting. We're going to cancel, but whatever you guys decide to make next, I will give you a 10 episode guarantee. And so that's how they ended up making Tim and Eric Awesome Show. Great job. Which I think is just sort of amazing, right?
Right.
And there's no magic, like this is the place you got to go or the person you got to be seen in front of. You got to take a risk. Like, why not? There's a reason why there's like any movie about making movies has that trope of where like the valet guy leaves his script in the producer's car and stuff like that. But it happens. The guy who wrote American Pie, do you know what the original title of that movie was? Teen sex comedy that could be made for under $10 million. That was the front page cover of that script. And so when he sent it out, somebody at Universal like saw that immediately, goes, I'm not even going to finish reading this. I'm going to have a meeting with this guy. And he brought him in. He goes, and it turned out to be really funny. But, he goes, if you had said the name of the movie was American Pie, I wouldn't have read it. It didn't capture my imagination with the title. Again, these are the people who are making creative decisions in Hollywood, which is unfortunate in a lot of cases.
Right. Because they're primarily making financial decisions.
Right.
Really is what they're doing.
They're looking and they're like, how can I sow $1 million and reap $100 million.
I believe Dan Harmon refers to that as the sweater guy.
The sweater guy.
Sweater guy. It used to be suits, but now they're all in sweaters. Yeah.
Also, by the way, in The Bad Guys, that animated movie I went to, I was like, the voice of the snake, I recognize it. Who is it? Is Mark Maron.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, so even Mark Maron can sell out a little bit. That's great. That's awesome. Fantastic.
We were talking about, mortality, right?
When?
And
like just now?
Just now, fairly recently within this conversation.
In that book I was reading, they were talking about it?
At some point within the last 35 minutes, you and I have touched on the topic of that. And I did just see Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. And we'll give this warning now. I don't think many spoilers are going to come out, but you might get a spoiler. But I had to hold off on seeing the show because I had flipping COVID. So if I was able to dodge spoilers, I think you're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm. What we should do is give 3 plot points, but one of them is fake.
There you go. There you go. But that movie is about grief and regret, and about characters who wish they could change their world, right? Go back and do things differently, to the point that they'll reach across different universes to try and create the world that they want to have versus the one that they do have. And it's not possible, right? You only have the now to make it right. You can't do it after the fact. You have to do it now, even if you are the Scarlet Witch, right? Even if you are the Illuminati. And that's something I've thought about so much recently too, especially with getting COVID. I'm one of the last people I think on earth to get COVID, is how it almost feels like to me, right? Because I never got it until just now. And so for roughly 2.5 years, I've been dodging this thing, and I finally got it. And for me, it felt like having a cold. And after realizing for me, it's just going to be a cold, I didn't realize that I would have this feeling of relief that I had needed over the past 2.5 years. Because that question was always out there for me. What will happen to me if/when I get COVID? And I got it, or at least this strain of it. And it felt like, along with with Mr. Burns, my job is essentially done now. If we do get to have our last 2 weekends of performances, which it's looking like we will, but who knows? But there's nothing for me to go do besides just be there and be supportive. So I kind of feel like that chapter is already closed for me as well, just about, even though no one has seen the show yet. But with those sort of chapters both closing at the same time, and then me having time to sit at home and reflect, I think I know I need to let myself off the hook finally of all the anxieties that I'm always making myself feel, because it's ruining my life, the experience of my life, not the life itself, right? Like, I'm still well fed. I have a lot of people in my life who love me, and who I love, and very privileged. And I live in a really great city, in a great country, on a great planet. But I'm routinely, as a force of habit, when I'm by myself, which is most of the time, going into my head and just feeling every anxiety and depression and worry that I can. And so I kind of feel like I'm at the moment where I need to go, it's okay for you to not force yourself to feel these things all day long, right? And you should. The point is not about what am I going to do in my future, but about what am I doing right at this very moment to soak all of this in. So,
do you think there's a fine line between routine and rut?
Yeah. I mean, a rut would be a routine that, how do you put this?
I think a routine can still bring you joy. When you're in a rut, you're doing things to do them rather than doing things to experience them.
Yeah, like it's affecting you negatively in some way too. So it's no, any benefit of the routine is at that point gone.
So I love to cook, but this last winter, Jill and I got into this rut of, we pretty much for a month ate the same meal plan every week. We had By the way, I'm trying to get them. I'd love for them to sponsor the show. Simix Meatballs, the best frozen meatball in the grocery store right now.
How do you spell that?
SIMEK''S.
Do you have to go to a special grocery store to get it?
I've found them at Hornbacher's,
Okay,
all their
good.
locations, and they're constantly on sale too. And here's what's nice. You can get little ones, and then you can get big ones. You can get Italian,
Big
and
swinging
you get
ones?
all beef, right?
Okay.
I do not care for their lasagna.
Okay.
So just so you know, they make meatballs, they make lasagna. Simix Meatballs. So we got into this habit because it's convenient of like mashed potatoes, gravy, meatballs, right? And
that sounds like a solid meal to me.
it is a solid meal.
Probably easy to prepare.
Easy to prepare because they're frozen meatballs. So all you got to do is make up some mashed potatoes and, put the gravy pot on the stove.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I enjoy them and I still do really like them, I kind of realized this month we had that dinner like 5 times, I think because it was easy. And then we got into the habit of making enough so we could eat it one night and then skip a night and then we'd have it again later on without even having to like freshly mash the potatoes. And then I was like, God, we've had taco night like 5 times. And we just got into this rut of food, and partially because we were busy during the day and we were zapped of energy by the time we hit the night. And I realized that like making dinner and kind of exploring in culinary ways is my way of keeping my routine fresh. And so it even involved like where we were grocery shopping, right? So we go to Costco and Hornbacher's in Osgood on a regular basis. And I said, let's go to Aldi, and maybe Aldi will inspire us to do something different. And now that it's grill season again, I can finally get the grill out, and that really takes things in a different twist. But I found myself kind of feeling like, well, I'm only eating to stay alive. I'm not eating for pleasure.
Yeah.
And that bums me out with stuff. And it took me a long time, but once I kind of self-actualized it, I remember telling Jill like, hey, we've got to do something. We've got to change whatever it is that we're doing. Like, let's try a stir fry night and I'll pull the wok out. Let's use our air fryer to do something we haven't done. Let's invite somebody over for dinner so that we don't make the same thing that we always make. And so that was one of my first big steps. And then this year we're going to do a bunch of different stuff with our garden. And so we're going to garden in more areas of our yard. And so hopefully that'll get me out of the rut of like, well, I just go outside and turn the sprinkler on and blah, blah, blah. Now I can appreciate aspects of that a little bit more than I used to. And so I'm trying to do these things to get out of the ruts that I see forming. The little things that like, even the way I drive to work. Do you take the same route to work every single morning?
Well, I usually work from home actually. So my
that's
routine is pretty rut-like.
Pretty ruttable.
The nice thing about my job though, is that I can do my job mostly anywhere where my computer is at. So my goal this year, one of my goals is to upgrade to one of the newer MacBook Pros that they have out now with the M1 chip, because the level of production I do now on an iMac, that thing could crunch through it. And then I could literally be anywhere that thing is. So I could be doing my job in Arkansas or Kentucky or Moorhead or Fargo at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. or midnight or wherever, or at Frying Pan or what have you, so that I could not have to be like, I got to go to that same room every day and do the exact same thing. That does drive me bonkers for sure.
I can't do my job from any. I mean,
right.
I can, but I can't. Like
right.
At the same time, like so, I could do my job from Disney World if I wanted, if I had the proper connection. But would I be giving it like my full attention? And that's the one thing that I and also my show is from 11 to 2, so I miss lunch.
Right.
Oh my God, do I miss lunch at a regular time? Not like, oh, I can go to Subway and get a sub at 10:30 in the morning, or I can go after all the buffets have closed at 2:00 and be like, can I have some chicken that you guys are going to throw away?
What's the vending machine game like at KFGO?
So they just upgraded it, but it's poor. And this is why. Constantly empty. Because so many people, since that place has people in it 24/7, there are people constantly buying Pop-Tarts and candy bars and bags of chips and soda and all that kind of stuff. So a couple of years ago, I asked my boss, like, hey, listen, because we had real old machines, like really old crap machines. I said, what if I invested in the machines and I give you like a 10% cut? And he said no. And I'm like, well, that sucks because this would have been perfect because all these money mouths are always chomping and chipping it up. And so recently, the Pepsi Corporation is the one who provides it, and they've restocked it. But we've gotten to the point of where we're leaving notes on the machines being like, stop putting in 2 rows of gum. No one wants your stank gum. Put in 2 rows of Buddy Bars, dick. And I finally cornered the guy one time, and I asked him, yeah,
motherfucker, what are you doing with that gum?
I saw the Pepsi truck in the parking lot, and I'm like, oh shit. And I ran out there, and I pleaded the case of what I felt my coworkers wanted. I'm like, do you see how no one has taken the jalapeno Cheetos? We want flaming hot. And he's like, hey man, they just give me the stuff and I put it in here. I've got no say of what happens in here. And I was like, well, then who does have say? JW Vending? Like, give me their number.
HM Pepsi. Call
yeah,
him.
Right? But it is one of those things that I thought, I interviewed some people a long time ago, and during the height of COVID, vending became one of the most sought after small businesses that you could start because people didn't want to stop into convenience stores, right? They wanted to just buy it from a vending machine. And so people
so everyone's touching the same buttons. And
everyone's touching the same buttons.
On the same thing.
But that's the beauty, right? Like, because it's a giant sneeze guard, right? Like, it's all contained in the box. Sure. But now it's fancy because you can tap your card on it. And so you don't even have to have change, which is really great. And then I found out that they automatically charge your card $2 for the treat vending machine. Oh. And then you have to ask for change or it just keeps it. It's like prepaying for your gas and not going back in and getting the money for it.
Got it. Okay.
When I was a kid, I got treed by a bear. Do you know that?
Hold on. Hold on 1 second there.
Yeah.
We just took a right turn. I don't know if I followed every word that you said, but I heard you.
Yeah.
And I heard bear.
Yeah.
Can you say the sentence again?
I got treed by a bear.
Treed was the word that I missed. So you climbed up a tree to escape a bear.
Mm-hmm. So my lake cabin had a ton of woods behind it, big wooded area. And after I read the book Hatchet when I was younger, my mom got me a hatchet with a thing you put on your belt.
I live outside, Mom.
And so I decided, it'd be really cool is if I went and I chopped down a tree with this. Now, luckily, I didn't try and chop down a big tree because I had read where the red fern grows. And you remember that pivotal scene where the tree, the hound dogs get the first raccoon up there and it's a big tree and he and his uncle and these blistered hands. So he's like, I promised them if they treed a coon, I was going to chop it down and we'd get that raccoon. So I started with smaller trees. So you'd exit out the back of our lake home. And then there was this really deep ravine area where, and it wasn't a big ravine. It just was deep enough. It was probably 30 or 40 feet down. And we never went down there, but that's where we would throw our compost garbage, right? Because we didn't have garbage collection at the lake. We had to bring everything back to Fargo. So if we had bits of fat from steak, or if we had corn husks, whatever that is, we'd have a bucket and we'd throw the bucket and we'd throw it down this little ravine.
So just a feeding ground for bears.
Right. Essentially what we were doing is making a bear pit. I didn't know this, and I don't think my parents really realized it either. But on the other side of this ravine, which is probably another 30 feet, there was a huge long area. And I mean, it went back for probably half a mile until you hit the main road. Our driveway went through it. And so I go into the woods. No one can see me out there. And thwack, thwack, thwack. Also, cutting down a tree is really hard.
With a hatchet?
With a hatchet. And the tree was small enough that it was real, I'd hit it and it would pretty much just shake and vibrate. So I had to put one leg up on it so that it would be sturdy so I could crack.
It's like the trolls and Uruk-hai and Lord of the Rings just cutting down the ends.
So finally I cut this tree down. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with it? And I'm like, I should cut down several of them and build myself a lean-to that can be my forest escape. So I put my hatchet back in my little like belt thing, and I'm looking for the next tree that I am going to man versus nature and take down. And all of a sudden I hear this like this sound, and it sounds like a truck is coming through the woods. And I look over, and it's probably like 40 yards away, a black bear. And I was like, oh fuck, it's a bear. Oh fuck. A bear. And we had a VHS tape called Clan of the Cave Bear. And it's a movie that I'm sure my parents watched. I don't know anything about it, but I know that bears are scary. And so I start like backing away, and the second I start moving away, it starts like coming at me a little bit faster. And bears run fast. Like they're big burly things, but they're kind of like the Chris Farley of animals. Like they look big and rotund, but they've got some real speed and nimbleness. And so there was a larger tree that had fallen next to another tree that kind of was sitting, making a triangle shape. And so I scurried up that tree that had the triangle that was, making the triangle, and I got up top. Now, this bear easily could have probably scaled that tree as well, but I end up 15 feet above the ground, like where I am. And so this bear gets right underneath, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm like, I'll take it out with my hatchet. So I pull my hatchet out of this thing, and I look at it, and I'm like, here we go. And I throw it. I don't even get anywhere near the bear, and it just lands clump in the ground. I'm like, oh, so now I gave away the only weapon to fight it off should this bear try and get up near me on the tree. And so I was very sad and very, very disappointed. And I stayed up there for about like an hour until this thing finally left. And then after we talked to like some neighbors and stuff like that, it turns out that there had been some black bear sightings, and this is probably a mama bear because people had also seen some cubs.
Okay, yeah.
And so I got treed by a bear. And then my wife was treed by a skunk in a similar situation. Yeah, where she saw a skunk while she was walking home from school.
I didn't realize how big of a situation this might be because I don't think I'm able to climb a tree. I just don't think I have the arm strength to do it.
I couldn't. No, and please note, I did not climb a tree like like a tree climber would. Like I was no Huckleberry Finn.
Okay.
I had to use a ramp, an inclined plane, to get to my destination. Oh,
I might try the whole play dead route instead.
Would just go floppy.
I mean, maybe I've seen videos where they say do that with a bear because the bear won't eat something that's dead or something like that. I don't know.
I watched an interesting, clip recently of a bear that like was chasing mountain goats right along this path, like in Yellowstone. And there's probably like 30 people on this path, and they're all freaking out. And the bear is a stone's throw away from them. And some dude yells, "He's going after the goats! He's going after the goats!" And it was great. Did you ever see the movie Almost Famous?
No. I've seen pieces.
So it's a parody of Lewis and Clark. In fact, it's the idea that Thomas Jefferson had a second expedition. And this movie's directed by Christopher Guest.
Definitely not seen this. Wasn't this Farley's last movie?
No.
Isn't it him and Matthew Perry?
Yeah. I don't know if that was his last.
I think it came out posthumously, I think.
Well, I'm pretty sure you're still alive when this came out. You should double check that one.
Oh, I might be thinking of a totally different thing.
Because because he was working on Shrek. He had recorded a bunch of the vocals for Shrek when he died. I mean, this was definitely in the time of like where his movies were declining severely. I feel like Beverly Hills Ninja might have come out after this. Anyway, in the movie Almost Heroes, there's a great part where they essentially have like a group of explorers who are just idiots. And one of them is they're all sleeping, and a bear comes into their camp. And Chris Farley, who's supposed to be this mountain man, tells him like, "Don't move. If you don't move, the bear won't come at you." And this character goes, "I've got an itch in my nose." And he goes, "Don't itch it." And he goes, "It feels like there's a bug up there." he goes, I don't know which is worse, the bear or this itchy nose. And so he finally itches his nose, and the bear immediately like attacks him and grabs his leg. He goes, the bear is definitely worse. And he gets drug away, and all they can find of him is his ear. And so one of them wants to do an experiment where he talks into the ear, and he's like, Bitwell, hello, Bitwell. And they hear the guy go, I can hear you, Pratt. And he's come back, and the bear has chewed off his leg. And he goes to Matthew Perry, and he's like, I suspect you want to put together a hunting party to take out the bear who took my leg. And he goes, right you are, Bitwell. Or what we could do is let the ravages of old age, a far crueler crime, take the bear. And he goes, revenge is sweet. And really, Almost Heroes is like a silly, dumb movie, but it's much better than people give it credit for. Christopher Guest is really good.
I didn't realize Chris Guest had directed that, but so Almost Famous, right?
You would. So when you watch it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is everybody from Waiting for Guffman.
Okay, Almost Famous is a Cameron Crowe film. Are you thinking about
Almost Heroes?
Almost
Heroes.
There we go. I think you said Almost Famous.
Well, I mean, there's a great bear scene in Almost Famous as well, where young Cameron Crowe is...
It was Farley's last leading film role and was released following his death in 97.
Oh, my gosh.
Yep, Almost Heroes. Yep. Because I remember... that's one of the things I remember seeing the sleeve for it at Videoland when I worked there all the time and being like, that's Chris Farley's last movie. I just remember saying it all the time to myself and never actually watched it.
It's full of like really funny running gags. It's too bad because... Christopher Guest has mastered the mockumentary, and you almost feel like at one point this was supposed to be that, and some studio executive was like, no, what if you did it just like as a regular movie? But Eugene Levy plays like this French fur trapper in it who's really funny. Like, I mean, the characters in it are just top notch. At one point, they like take on a conquistador. It's just amazing. I highly recommend that movie.
Is it available on Blu-ray or streaming?
I don't know. It's definitely on VHS.
It's definitely VHS and DVD for sure.
I've streamed it. I know. I made Jill watch it. I made Jill watch that and Clifford in the same weekend. To be like, this is how my humor was created.
The stuff that I'm finding that's only on VHS is like the weird stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff that's like, oh, okay, I can tell why this didn't get an audience anywhere else beyond VHS.
There's a lot. Well, there's a lot of companies that folded before going to like DVD.
Right.
And whatever company bought their stuff in bankruptcy has just never bothered to do anything with what they had.
A lot of movies just went to streaming and skipped Blu-ray as well. Mm-hmm. So there's just no physical media that you could get to watch it at home.
So I'm working on a thing right now for a sketch comedy, like an audio sketch comedy show. And one of the things I'm really excited about is we're going to press it on vinyl.
Ooh.
Rather than release podcasts.
Nice.
Yeah, like I'm kind of excited about that, where like you've really got to put the effort in. It's the same way as like, again, in this comedy drama by Bob Odenkirk, he talked about how he and David Cross were mad that they weren't going to put the show onto VHS, like onto tape. So they went out and they had it professionally dubbed, and they sent it to like Blockbusters and like video rental places across the country. And they said, hi, we're the creators. You can have this for free. You can't charge anyone to rent it, but we'll give a really good pitch for why they should go back and rent something and actually pay you for it. So the beginning is them being like, hey, thanks for taking out this video. You should go back to wherever you got it and spend some money and get like Homer and Eddie. Yeah. And I think that like, that is awesome. That guerrilla style, like, we'll make sure someone can see it. Nowadays, it's so easy, right? Mm-hmm. With YouTube, TikTok, everything like that. But back in the day, you had to dub VHS tapes and then send them to places.
It's like bands or rappers or putting stuff on an audio cassette tape back in the day.
Right.
Like just handing those out at shows. And that's what Eminem was doing, handing out audio cassette tapes at shows.
Mitch Hedberg talks about that in one of his routines. He goes, my first album, I put it into record stores. You can find record stores, not because they sell it, but because I leave copies there, hoping that one day someone will find it. Mitch Hedberg, Gone Way Too Soon. That guy was a great comedian. If you've never heard Mitch Hedberg stuff, it is pretty funny today.
Mm-hmm.
It was hilarious back then.
Yeah.
Like, highly recommend. I'm in a long sleeve white button up shirt, a black sweater vest, and some khakis. And I got to go buy a mini fridge. So I think it's time that we wrap this bad boy up.
Sounds good. I'm going to go buy a new hair trimmer because all mine are dull.
Do you know what you're going to go for? You're going to go for the Wall brand, a WHL?
I'm probably going to go for a Philips or a Norelco.
Philips?
One of those.
My problem is Philips is one of those companies who's like, hey, stay in your lane, man. Are you making televisions? Are you making TV tuners? Are you making light bulbs? Why are you getting into the hair trimming game, Philips?
All I can say is I've gone with off-brand hair trimmers for the past couple of years, and they just don't hold up over time. Like, one thing about being a bald man is that, yes, you don't necessarily have to deal with the kind of hair care that people with hair, like hairmen like you, or women with long hair have to deal with, right? But at the same time, it's its own maintenance where really usually I'm in the habit of cutting my hair on Sundays and Wednesdays just because after what is there and it grows out a bit, it just looks ridiculous. So you have to keep it short constantly. So you're going through electric razors like crazy. I should probably learn how to sharpen them.
You should try Wall.
Wall?
It's a good brand. It's like, you know how like Crest is like 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Crest.
Yeah.
Wall is, I believe, an industry standard for barbers and hairstylists.
Where should I go to? Target Boutique?
I believe Target Boutique carries them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably go there.
WHL.
I will take a
Wall.
look. Thank you.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. What's really funny is if you buy a Wall hair trimmer, you can also trim your, down there.